All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Play, Pause, Rewind. It is our 21st episode. We haven't recorded in almost a month, I feel like. I think that's right. How have you been?
It's been a while.
In the interim, Niles?
Oh, I've been great. We're recording this the day after Halloween, actually. So it's
We
a
are.
fantastic Halloween. It's nice to get back out and see people and actually do fun things again.
Yeah, exactly. What for our audience, Niles, who did you go as for Halloween?
Oh, yes. I went as Dr. Tobias Funke. And my girlfriend went as Lindsay. If any of you have seen Arrested Development, you know what I'm talking about. And I blew myself all over. I had blue paint all over my head. I was terrifying. What did you go as, Dylan?
I went as a John Constantine, and DC Comics character, a drinking, chain-smoking warlock who is condemned to hell, and it's a very fun character.
It's a good role model for the kids, you know?
I was not around kids, so it does not matter. But, yeah, we're talking Dune this week. I had the chance to see it in IMAX on the Sunday of opening weekend. Niles, did you have a chance to go to the theater, or did you watch at home?
Yeah, I watched it in the theater. I didn't go see IMAX, but yeah, I just went, caught a show. And yeah, honestly, it was like in the middle of the day, and I loved it. Honestly,
Yeah.
it's difficult. I've said this before about other movies that we've talked about, but this movie is difficult for me to find something to complain about again. And I really like this, this kind of genre too. I feel like sci-fi and fantasy, that stuff is right up my alley. Like, I love that. I love Game of Thrones. I love, Star Wars, obviously, and get into Mistborn now too, and that stuff is really interesting. And so I very much enjoyed this.
I agree. I really loved this movie, and for those who are less familiar, Dune is an adaptation of the 1965 novel by Frank Herbert. This adaptation is directed and co-written by Denis Villeneuve, who has made Prisoners, Enemy, Blade Runner 2049, Arrival, and I'm forgetting one. I forgot one, but he hasn't made a bad movie. But almost all of his movies do not do very well financially, which was concerning going into this, because if you didn't know, this is only part one of Dune. And you should know that going in, because if you're expecting a definitive conclusion, you will not get it. And that is sort of a spoiler, but it's also in the title of the movie. It is Dune Part 1. So be prepared going in that it does just kind of end. It was satisfying enough for me, but if you expect a full story, you might be disappointed. So just go in with that knowledge, I think.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, yeah, not to dwell too much on the ending and spoil too much, but yeah, I think the ending was kind of the perfect way to do it, because I feel like there's so many movies these days, or at least in recent years, these past few decades, with like Hunger Games and like, some of those other films that have done like multiple parts for a single movie, and they just kind of drag it out, like The Hobbit, three different films for this really epic tale. It's really epic, but I feel like it's a little too much. But this movie feels more appropriate to have multiple movies for it.
Right. This feels like there are multiple movies because there was that much source material to adapt. Something like The Hobbit is the perfect counterexample, because that book is small. And to the point, and they wanted to stretch it out because they wanted to replicate the Lord of the Rings success. And the Lord of the Rings is not small. The Hobbit is. And to the point in that where the second movie ended with an action scene that is just made up whole cloth for the movies, because there wasn't a climactic sequence for them to end on there. And that's a problem. This does not have that. There is a shift that is a good place to end this story, and we'll get more into it in spoilers, but it works. It flows naturally, and has a huge cast, this movie. We've got Timothée Chalamet, Zendaya, Oscar Isaac, Josh Brolin, Rebecca Ferguson, Javier Bardem, Stellan Skarsgård, Dave Bautista, and way more people than that, but that is already a huge cast, to the point where some of these characters are barely in the movie, which is fine, but if you were going to this movie primarily for one specific person, who we'll talk about in a bit, might be a little annoyed, but get over it.
Yeah, yeah. This,
It
I
is.
mean, so it's like you were saying, it's a stacked cast. There's a lot of people on it, and I respect all these actors. They did a fantastic job with the roles. I think all of them really hit their stride with these
Yeah.
characters. Um, I think this is just me though. I'm just gonna throw this out there, but every time I see Josh Brolin now, I just see Thanos. I can't not see it with the voice and the face. Like, it's just hard for me.
That's so funny. I I remembered the movie I forgot of Denis Villeneuve because Josh Brolin's in it, Sicario. So they had collaborated previously on that.
Oh right.
Yeah, he plays like a CIA guy who puts together the team in Sicario. Very upsetting movie, Sicario. Well, let me ask you this: what is your familiarity with Dune before having seen this movie?
None. Yeah, we should definitely preface this episode by saying, yeah, I have not read Dune. It is on my bookshelf, and I did buy the book specifically because of this movie. Like, I was like, okay, I need to watch this. Or if I'm going to watch this movie, then I feel like I need to read the book. And I am going to read the book, after watching this movie, of course. Like, I think the more that I researched this movie, like, to prep for this episode and talk about it, the more I just got just so interested in it. There's so much like going on in there. There's like influences from different cultures. There's like specific languages. There's reasons for why they don't have like computers and like why they don't use like why they fight with swords and everything. And like all the technology is just so interesting too. So I am definitely going to read the book, but I'm not very familiar with the series. What about you, Dylan?
Same. I deliberately stayed completely blind to everything going into this. I wanted to be totally fresh going into this movie, and I'm really glad I did because it's really rare that a movie is so good and so engrossing that you're just completely transported to an entire universe that you have no familiarity with. Like, I knew literally nothing going in, and the movie, to me, does a really good job of not spelling out its entire world, but it hints at just enough to where you feel like you know what's going on, and you do know enough for the story that's being told, and the stuff that was more vague and I didn't feel like I totally understood, I am confident that I will when I need to. So,
yeah,
like just one example, and it's not really a spoiler, you mentioned it already, but they don't use guns in Dune. And I know there's a reason they chose not to with AI and stuff, but I haven't looked in the details of that, and I don't want to yet. But you don't even need to know that. The movie doesn't have to explain why they don't use guns because they all have these little personal shields. And the personal shields basically make fast-moving projectiles obsolete because they can't puncture them. So it's like and then that's good filmmaking to me. You see the suit in action, and then you understand, oh, this is why they don't use guns, and then they highlight like, oh, the slow-moving blade penetrates the shield, and that is important for the rest of the movie. It's like one line of exposition. You are expected to hear and process it, and then it comes back later. Good stuff.
Yeah, totally. I think the storytelling was just superb in this movie. Like just like you were saying, Dune is an epic. It is such a stacked book. It is loaded. Like, that thing is going to take a while to get through for sure for us.
And it's only one of 6, I think. They're Dune.
I didn't know that.
From what I understand, Dune, the first book, is for the most part a full story, but there are 5 more Dune books, some of which are written by Frank Herbert, some by his son, I think. And eventually I'll read them all. I will read the first book in the interim between now and part 2 because I would like to experience it. I'll also watch the David Lynch movie at some point.
Yeah, me too.
But
Just like you were saying with the storytelling, I think he did such a good job with this movie of like piecing out small bits of material, but like still squeezing in enough content, like enough world building within 2 hours and 35 minutes runtime total. Like, this is a long movie, but still, like, he didn't even get all the way through the first book. He barely got like through half of it, if I recall correctly from my research. And so it's like they did a great job of squeezing enough information in there to like get me really interested and learn what the world is and get all the details that I need to know to really set it up for really good success. But yes, I would also like to watch the David Lynch movie at some point too.
Yeah. I think I'll read the book first and then watch the Lynch movie. I've heard the Lynch version is not great, so I'd rather experience the full story in a great version of it rather than a not so great one. But I thought this movie was pretty spectacular. It's beautiful to look at. The sound design and soundtrack are really unique, I think, in the sci-fi fantasy space right now. You have a lot of percussion, a lot of vocals used differently than they traditionally are. Like it draws more attention to itself than a lot of soundtracks do, which is good in some instances. Like here, I think it was good.
Well, yeah, and kind of to just reiterate your point, I remember watching the movie, and yeah, like one point I'm like, that is definitely like a didgeridoo. Like I can hear like the Aboriginal kind of influence from Australia in this scene, and then you go to a next scene and it's like very like orchestral and kind of like it's like very lofty with the voices, and it's like, okay, so that's a different influence over there. And it's like, this movie takes place in like it takes place in 8,000 years in the future. Interstellar travel is possible, and it kind of feels like a good meshing of like all the cultures of the world in a way. You see a lot of influences, and you kind of see how things kind of progressed to the state that they are in this film, and it's like, oh, nice. I love all these little cultural nuggets. They're really cool.
Yeah, I love how it seems, at least, that it's meant to be a further on time frame in our universe, which is wild because it's so different.
Yeah.
And
it is.
And that's cool. It's cool in a different way than a sci-fi story set in an entirely different universe than ours. But the visuals as well were a pretty excellent element. Each planet we visit is very distinct, and I think is showcased really well. And important to differences between the planets, two of them specifically, are incredibly important to the plot, which we'll talk about later. And I just love how different each one feels. Like Caladan, where the Atreides are from, is very serene and green and has a lot of water. And then obviously Arrakis is the famous desert planet with the big sandworms, and they feel different, and you can understand how the characters process them differently just based on how they're showcased.
Yeah, absolutely. And, to kind of piggyback off of the visuals, I would also say that one of the things that I loved the most about this movie was the ship designs. I thought that, like, all the spaceships, like the Dragonfly thing, the little, like, cylinder in space, like, so cool.
Yes.
Cool.
Great. And it never is like, this is what the space cylinder does. It's just there. Yeah. I guess maybe we'll find out, maybe we won't, but it's okay. It's just a piece of the world that we can think about. I'm sure the book explains it plenty well, but the ship design was great. I like the Atreides landing craft are those big behemoth blocks kind of, and then you have the little dragonflies. Everything was, and I don't want to talk too much without spoilers, but we'll get to more of the cool stuff in a bit. So, like I said earlier, there's not much to complain about with this movie for me. The pacing was really great. I felt like it was very consistent throughout the film. The characters were wonderful. The story was excellent. And like we said, the storytelling was really well done. Let's see here. Anything else we got before non-spoilers? Yeah, it was really well paced. It didn't feel its length for me, but I was pretty engrossed the entire time. And I mentioned the world building stuff already. I feel like it was world built very intelligently, and I'm sure there was a lot of stuff stripped out but it gave you the details you need to know for the story being told, which is the best way, I think, to do it, and the rest can be hinted at through visuals and background details.
Yeah, absolutely. But not to spoil too much, but it sounds like Dune 2, the second one, is going to happen.
It is confirmed. Right? Yeah, it got confirmed the Tuesday after opening weekend, which is excellent. We will get the conclusion of the story. And Yeah. So with that wonderful news for all of us, let's hop into spoilers a little bit.
Let's do it.
Yeah, we talked about the attention to detail in the world building already with the lack of guns, and you have here that it's something to do with AI and humanity kind of turned away from tech at a certain point.
Yeah. From what again, Dylan and I have not read the books, but we will. And from what I was reading, I've read a bunch of articles before we record this episode, and from what I understand, they had to cut out a lot of stuff from the book because it's so much information, and there's a lot of exposition, and there's a lot of the main character Paul. He's got that psychic power, so he can kind of like
the voice.
The voice. He can kind of like command people, but from my understanding, he can also kind of like read people's minds a little bit. I don't know, but so there's a lot of details in this book, and they do explain why there's no guns in this world, and I feel like there's some people who are like, why, it's 8,000 years in the future, why are they not blowing each other to smithereens with lasers? And we do see some lasers, we do see some missiles and stuff. And that's when they're attacking the people at night. It's an ambush, which we'll talk about later as well. But basically, my understanding is that humanity kind of turned away from AI at a certain point because it kind of started to become like the Terminator. Like it was kind of starting to threaten our existence. It was becoming a little bit too powerful, and so we just kind of made the good idea or the decision to say, you know what, let's get to move away from that kind of stuff and that reliance on computers and AI. So that's why there's not like a lot of like crazy computers and stuff. And the reason why there's no guns also is kind of along a similar line of like of the tech that we were talking about earlier with the shield technology. You can press that button on that like device on your wrist, and then all of a sudden you have this shield around your body that can only be like penetrated from like a knife. It can like deflect things, but like
it's only like slow really moving projectile, which is why in that ambush you even see the weapons that are shooting the Atreides ships. When they hit the shield, they slow down and they kind of push through really slowly. And I think an attack like that only works because those ships are unmanned at the time, standing still. So that adds a whole interesting element to like the battles of this universe if projectiles are just not as viable. One thing I do know about the Dune lore is the turn away from AI is one of the reasons spice is so important. The human navigators who travel through the interstellar systems, they take the hallucinogenic spice, and that is how they know how to navigate the...
Oh, that's cool.
So that's why it's so important and makes people so wealthy, because interstellar travel is not possible without spice.
I thought it was just a form of fuel, like you just fill up your ship with it.
It might be fuel as well, but I know for a fact that it is also. The navigators take it. So it's like it's the most important thing in the universe. It's those and it's a drug.
Everything in life is either fuel or it's a drug. That's what's important. But I think the attention to detail is really cool, and that's like really interesting that's kind of the direction that the author originally wanted to take with this Frank Herbert. He said, this is the humanity that I'm envisioning in this fictional world 8,000 years in the future. We've advanced beyond the need for computers and for guns. Like it's very interesting.
But all the other vices of humanity remain, it seems.
It really seems like that.
Yeah.
I think, we have to talk about the main character, Paul, the House Atreides, who's played by Timothée Chalamet, right? Did I pronounce that right?
I think so. Just Timothée Chalamet, so.
Yeah. We'll just say I did. And I really haven't seen him in a lot before this, honestly. I still got to see Lady Bird, and I still got to see like The King and some other things that he's been in. But he's my girlfriend was saying this earlier too, is like he's gonna look like he's a young man like 21 for like 20 years. He's going to
Yeah.
look the same age for that long. And it's like, yes, he can keep making these kinds of movies where he's the young prodigal son. But I think he was very well cast for this role. I think he did a really good job as Paul.
Yeah.
And, for, being the heir to one of the most powerful houses in the galaxy, he sure is well adjusted.
Yeah, he seems to be, and I'm curious to see if he stays that way going forward, because he, you never know when something like what happened to him happens. You can either go stronger or you can become Anakin Skywalker. So we'll see which direction he takes ultimately.
That's true.
Because I have heard you mentioned down below, and we can talk about it more later, but the critique of the white savior story. And
yes,
apparently, from the little I know that I've allowed myself to read, the Dune fandom and the author were very aware of this, did it intentionally, and it is a cautionary tale about white saviors. So, with that, I am curious. Which way will he go? Will it be a fall from grace, or will it just be like something more in the middle? I don't know. Or will he stay good and something else happens? I really don't know, and I don't want to know. But I have seen comments, because of course the critiques start flooding in about that. The white savior is a very known trope and worthy of critique. But the people were like, the Dune fandom was ready for this. We understand it, and we have to tell you that is the point. So so I'm interested to know exactly how that is the point, which is one reason I'll be reading the book soon.
We could talk about this a little bit more later too. But I think at the end of the movie, it seems like he's kind of started to accept that he is the one. He is I can't remember exactly what the word that they use in the film, but he is
I don't either.
He is the culmination of all this very selective breeding, generation after generation, by that one household.
The Bene Gesserit.
The Bene Gesserit.
The women who control everything behind the scenes. I want to learn more about them.
They're the puppet masters. And, it seems like he has kind of accepted that idea at the end, that he's like, I am going to one day be the emperor, and I'm going to change this world. I'm going to change the empire, or I'm going to change at least this world for the better.
Right.
And I think, that it does feel like it's starting to become a cautionary tale that this power could go to his head. So I am interested to see what happens next, and I really hope no one spoils it for me. I do have another friend who's really into Dune, so I really hope he's just gonna wait for me to finish the book and everything before he's like, okay, let's talk about it. I want to tell you everything.
But I do think the Bene Gesserit, which his mom Jessica is a part. I'm really interested to see more about what their motivation is and what exactly the nature of this prophecy that they've worked for is. And it's an interesting wrinkle on the prophecy trope too, because it's not like he was just the chosen one who was born. This was a very deliberate effort over centuries to create this person. And it seems like he's not too thrilled about it when he finds out that his mom did this intentionally, birthed him to be a prophecy child. He's kind of like, what? Why? What the fuck?
Come on, Mom. I just wanted to be a normal boy.
Yeah, but he has that voice I guess as a result of this, or maybe something else. But also he gets visions, and as we find out by the end of the movie, the visions are not reliable, because the guy he fights at the end and kills in his vision, it seems like he was going to be a mentor or something. Remember, he's like, "Come with me, and I'll show you something." And that's not going to happen.
Yeah, of course, because he kills him. Well, I think it kind of speaks to. Well, I think the dreams are accurate in a way. It's more of a symbolic meaning, because he was saying, "I'm going to show you the way. I'm going to teach you the way of the desert." And the only way that you can really become initiated in the desert is with the Fremen.
Fremen, but yeah.
Fremen, thank you. Fremen. And he kind of realizes that by the end of the book or by the end of the film, he's like,
Mm-hmm.
you know, I need to go into the desert to find myself, to find, you know, my purpose and really kind of come into my own and
Mm-hmm.
figure out how to bring down our rival house. So I think, you know, yes, the vision wasn't accurate because he killed him and he wasn't technically his guide,
Mm-hmm.
but he's more of like his jumping off point to get into the desert, to
Okay.
start his learning experience and all that stuff. So that's kind of how I'm interpreting it, is that there's some symbolism in his visions,
Mm-hmm.
but they're not going to be accurate. You know, it's the way a dream is.
Yeah.
You know, you wake up from the dream and you're like, oh, I was just falling. Ah, man, at least I'm not going to fall today. But then you get fired or something. You know, it's like an omen.
Yeah. I interpret it like, I think a little bit similar, but slightly different. Like, I think his visions, the impression of them is right. Like, there will be someone who shows him the ways of the desert, but I think it's going to be the Javier Bardem character, not the guy he fought at the end. So he's like seeing the things that will happen, but not necessarily as they will happen or with the people that
Yeah.
he initially sees. Which, I mean, there's a lot of visions with Zendaya's character. Many of, at least one, she kills him in.
Yeah.
So that'll be interesting to see if that plays out or how it plays out. But his powers are very wild, I think. The voice is really neat, that commanding voice where he could just make people do things.
I really like the voice. You know, it's kind of like the Force, but you know, you just got to hit the right tone, the right pitch. Like, I thought that was really interesting, and yeah, I think, you know, I want to learn more about his powers, and I also want to learn more about what was that, the Ben Garrett? What were those women called?
The Bene Gesserit.
The Bene Gesserit. Thank you. I want to learn more about them because they are very interesting to me, and I just want to learn a lot more about them. So yes, he has some very trippy psychic powers.
Well, and just the politics of it are so interesting. Like the Harkonnens, when they want to kill all the Atreides, like they made a deal with that main Bene Gesserit lady where they can't kill Paul and Jessica. So he's like, just dump them in the desert. They'll die, and we can say we didn't kill them. And I feel like they know accurately that woman will be okay with that line of logic. Like,
Yeah.
because it's very everybody. It's more Game of Thrones than it is Star Wars, I think. Although Dune is an influence of Star Wars, from what I understand.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
cool. Yeah. Yeah, I would agree. Yeah, it does feel like there's a lot of like political powers going on and like, you know, this vast empire, and you have to balance like the needs and the wants and the expectations of everyone. And yeah, I think there was also that line when Paul's talking to his father about like power or something like that, about like, how are we going to win like on Arcades? Like, how are we going to get like the spice or something like that? And he's like, you know, we're talking about political power here. We're not talking about like brute force. We're talking about political power.
Right. And I love that element too, because Duke Leto, played by Oscar Isaac, who crushes it, I think. He has there are some characters who are like, this is cool, like we're getting gifted this, and then the Duke is kind of like, no, it's not a gift. Like, this is setting, and that's an element of the politics that's so interesting. It's like they're said to be a rising house and a voice that the Empire is respecting, so they're a threat to the Emperor. So he gives them Arrakis to put them at odds with the Harkonnens, and Duke Leto is like onto this from the moment. Like, they get it, which is why he wants desert power. He wants to cultivate that alliance as soon as possible with the Fremen so they can survive. And the way Isaac plays the role, there's just like, he just feels the inevitability of his death, basically. You can kind of feel it from his very earliest scenes, because he's like, we're fucked. Like, this entire thing is fucked, and if we don't establish ourselves here instantly, like, we're done.
Yeah. That's so true. And I mean, speaking of, you know, Oscar Isaac, you know, yeah, he did such a great job, and you could definitely feel like his kind of anxiety for the situation when he was talking with other characters, and you know, even with the ecologist lady, what was her name? You know who I'm talking about.
Oh, the Judge of the Change, that one?
Yes,
yeah.
thank you. The Judge of the Change. That's the word I was looking for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that was a great dynamic too, because he's like, see, they're fucking us, and but it's interesting because at that point she's not interested in helping them to that degree. Like, she's like, it's just old equipment, and she's probably right in that instance. But yeah, that was interesting to see. I loved that sequence where they save the people on the crawler. It was really tense, and it made me like the Duke a lot.
Yeah, no, yeah. What an awesome guy. He's like, I'm actually gonna go out into the field and see how shit is going down.
Mm-hmm.
Oh shit, those people need some help. We're going in there. Like,
Yeah.
he's a good guy at the end of the day. He's not like some evil dude who's like trying to just like squeeze every penny he can out of the spice trade. Like, he's like, he's a family guy, and he's here for his crew, and just for the House of Atreides and all of his men. And that just kind of, you have a note here in our show notes about like how that just kind of amplified the massacre of the House Atreides.
Yeah, it really gives him a save the cat moment. And he's still, in fairness, like, he's still like a colonizer in this equation here, but he's doing his best. Like, he's forced to be here, and he does seem genuinely interested in an actual partnership with the Fremen people. Like, when Javier Bardem tells him, it's like, don't come into the desert and seek out our places. He's like, well, I have to go out in the desert sometimes. That is my job, but I will never look for your villages. You can do whatever you want, and we will do our business. You can do yours. We can help each other out. Like, it seems like he's trying his best to make a bad situation good, which is, and he may just be like good in comparison to the Harkonnens, but he seems like he has a lot of genuine, like, positive traits and compassion. Like, when Paul sort of hints that he doesn't necessarily want to be the Duke. I love the line he says. It's like, then you'll still be the only thing I ever needed you to be, my son, and which is cool. Obviously, Paul will end up taking up that mantle anyway as a result of the events of this story, because they are betrayed by the Doctor, which is the one thing that is not fleshed out that great. Apparently, it is much more in the book and the old adaptation. And that could have been fixed pretty quickly. They could have just had a line or two mentioning the Doctor's wife. It would have been fine, but they didn't.
Yeah, it's fine. Yeah, I think that that would be one of the few complaints that I have with this film is that kind of came out of left field. Like, oh, I thought he was just a good doctor. Like, what the hell? Like, there was no real. I mean, if you were watching like the scenes really carefully, you might have been able to see some things. Like, he kind of hesitated at the door when he was leaving, and all this other stuff. So, It is kind of tough too, because like what you were just saying, he's Duke Leto. Yeah, he's clearly looking out for his family, but he's a colonizer, and that's kind of like the thing about with Dune too, is that since there's so much information in this, it's a really complex story. It's not just like the good versus the bad. It's not just like the American government symbol versus the Native American symbol. It's not just like the colonizer versus the indigenous people. It's like there's a little bit more of a dynamic going on here. It's a little bit more complicated than just like bad versus evil. Everyone's kind of got some weird morals, because like, even though,
except for the Baron, like the Harkonnens are pretty.
Yes,
and I think that's the complicating factor, right? Is you have the colonizing Atreides coming into these people's lands, but you are also contrasting them against the Harkonnens who were there before and were clearly just brutal and cruel when they did not need to be. So it paints the Atreides in a better light than maybe they would be otherwise. Not that they are being evil in the movie. They're not, but they are still occupiers of someone else's land.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I mean, I was just going to speak more to like, the Duke's, because he's not technically from my understanding, he's not technically married to Jessica.
No,
it's a concubine situation.
She's his concubine, which took me off guard. I wasn't expecting that.
Yeah, I didn't see that coming either. And it's like, oh, that's interesting. Like, why does that power dynamic exist? Like, why is this kind of like sexism kind of exist where, you know, she's just kind of second tier and there's a bunch of men in the military and there's, you know, like she's still kind of part of the family, but I guess technically she's not.
Yeah. And and it's interesting. He expresses regret at that. It's one of the last things he does before he dies. And in that moment, he knows he's dead. Like it almost feels like he knows they're getting attacked that night, which he doesn't, obviously, otherwise he would have stayed up and prepared more, but he knows the end is near, which is so hard to watch. But I think we have a couple notes about the Atreides here. It's the cultivating desert power line that he has. I love that line because it shows his like mind as a tactician, and it also illustrates how if a civilization builds up military strength because of the environment they have, once they're pulled out of that environment, that strength is gone. Like he said, it's like they have air and water power on Caladan, and then you really see how without that, they're defeated in like 2 hours. Their entire house is wiped out in 2 hours because they do not have the things that make them strong. It's so smart.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah, it's a crazy dynamic, and you know, it kind of goes back to, you know, like classical warfare, you know, of course, and you know, I just restarted playing this game called Bad North on my Nintendo Switch, and it's like this Viking invader game where you're trying to defend an island with just like a few squads, you know, and it's really about, you know, using the landscape, like the natural environment to your advantage. And that's, you know, I'm just thinking of that right now.
Yeah.
Because I'm playing that game again. But, you know, he's thinking of this all the time because this is his life. This is the House of Atreides. This is how you know, carry on and you give something to your descendants and everything. Like I really like that scene where they were kind of in the graveyard. Yeah, like we've been talking about it for a little bit, and it's like all these tombstones are the same. This is like hundreds, if not thousands of years of lineage.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's all wiped out in 2 hours.
And it's interesting too, because it's Duke Atreides, like he knows exactly what's going to happen. He knows they're going to get attacked, probably by the Harkonnens, and he's preparing for it. He has a plan. He sends Duncan Idaho ahead early to initiate the talks with the Fremen. He has the meeting with the Javier Bardem character that goes pretty well. Like, he's laid the foundation for what he needs to do, but he just didn't have enough time to fulfill it because the Harkonnens got the Emperor's assistance, and they just struck right away. So it's like, even the smartest people with the best plans can still be totally screwed over just if the power dynamic outside of their control shifts. And it's so like disempowering to watch that happen because it would have been satisfying to see them all like team up and defend themselves against the Harkonnens, but that doesn't get to happen.
Yeah, I feel like, you know, that scene, like the fall of the House Atreides, it really felt Shakespearean in a way, you know, like the build up to it is like so well done, and like it really takes its time. Like it kind of almost feels like, you know, like the end of Macbeth, you know, where his forces are, am I remembering it correctly? I'm remembering a version of it, I think. Yeah. But you know, he's basically losing, and it just feels like he's been bested, you know. He made every possible decision that he could have in the right light, and he tried to be diplomatic, and he tried to be eloquent, and he tried this and that, and then at the end of the day, you know, he just loses.
Yeah,
it's a shame, but you know, it does really kind of strike a chord.
And it caught me by surprise too. I thought the twist of this movie was going to be that Duke Atreides and the family have sort of a secret, darker side, and Paul is forced to leave and join the Fremen against them. I thought which is a far more predictable route for the story to go, but I really thought that that was going to be the message of this movie, is that this colonizing force must be repelled. And Paul realizes he doesn't want to be part of that problem anymore, but instead they are completely wiped out. Every single. Well, wait, did Josh Brolin die? Did Gurney die?
I don't know. The last shot that we have of him is him like running into battle.
Okay. So we don't know.
We don't know, but I'm pretty sure he died. But I'm sure that they'll find a way to bring him back, probably, because they didn't show his death on screen.
Right. Exactly. That's the rule, right? If we don't see him die, they're still maybe out there. And apparently, I mean, Duncan Idaho dies.
Yeah.
However, he is apparently a major protagonist in later books. So I don't understand how that works, but I really liked him. I liked Jason Momoa a lot. He was very jovial in contrast to the rest of the characters.
Well, you never know. He was in that kind of it was like a power place, right? But there was like, that's where like the whole kind of showdown went. Like it was like some kind of like old power generator place, but there was also
Something
like
like
plant
that.
life growing there too. So maybe there's like, maybe some of the Freemen survived and they kind of like nurse him back to health.
Maybe.
You never know.
Or maybe it's a totally different version of him somehow. I don't know. But Jason Momoa was really charismatic in the role, but he still had like a cold, badass streak once everything starts going wrong. Like, he's really fun when things are good, but he's pretty serious once the attack starts happening. And he's kind of badass. Like, he saves everyone he can. That's his mission.
Yeah, he gets stabbed, and then he stands back up, takes that knife out, and then kills a bunch more people with it. And it's like, holy shit! If I got stabbed, I would just die.
Yeah. Even that scene of him flying away from the city, like he's outmaneuvering all the enemy crafts, and he escapes so he can go look for Paul and Jessica, which is great that he did that because it's the only reason they survived.
Yep. Yeah, without him, that would have been bad. But yeah, also with Duncan, he was such a good vehicle to like introduce some really interesting technology too. He like introduced like the sand compactor thing with like all the equipment that he kind of brought back. He's like, here's a compass, it'll come in handy later, and it's like, it did. That's so cool. Like they did a good job of being like, let's dice these things out now, like with the suits that can recycle your body sweat and your tears and everything and turn it into drinkable water. Whoa, awesome.
Yeah.
Give me one of those.
Leading up to the movie, I was so curious what the little things were going to do, and that makes sense. The planet is so hot that you cannot survive without rehydrating through your bodily fluids. The suits look really neat too. They're really uniquely designed, I think.
Yeah, they were badass. I really like them. But yeah, I also really like the dynamic between Paul and his mother. I thought that was really interesting as the movie went on. Learning more about her and I just thought they had a really good dynamic, a good back and forth.
They have a really good relationship, and I think Paul has a great relationship with both of his parents because they both want very specific things from him. Like Duke Leto wants him to be the heir, and Jessica wants him to be the prophecy boy. But they both also want what's best for him beyond that too, even though he could very easily have died with that little hand in the box thing. But it's with Jessica, it's even more interesting because you can see her conflict between her goals as the Bene Gesserit and her goals as a mother to him, and how that's in conflict the entire movie. And even the Duke asks her that before he dies. Remember, he's like, if something happens, will you protect him? And she's like, of course. Like, not you. The Bene Gesserit. It's so wild.
Yeah, I thought that was a really neat thing to throw in there. She's got to balance those two expectations of being a mother and being strong and not showing any fear, and then trying to keep him aligned on that path of being the forsaken one,
Yeah. Whatever he is meant to be.
Yeah, the savior of everything.
Oh, what did you think of the worms?
Oh yeah, we have to talk about the worms. I loved it. I love those worms. They're
They're
so
so
I
cool.
can't
They're
wait.
great.
I cannot wait till the second one because of that last shot where that guy is like riding the
Writing it,
worm.
yeah.
Yes, 100 times yes.
Oh yeah.
Like,
And I love the walk they have to do, and just the reason they are able to survive and even get to the Fremen is Paul was studying for coming to Arrakis. Like, he was doing his prep, like his like the elder members of his family were doing their military prep. He was doing his education, and that is how they lived.
yeah, thank God for that thing that was in the movie earlier. It came back. It came back.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really liked I thought the worms were super cool. And it's so interesting to think about sand as like a liquid, you know, like cuz like the worms just made the sand just become like so loose that it just flowed like waves, and that was so cool to watch, like, you know, cuz we don't see that in the real world. Like, it's
No.
it's stationary, but the winds will blow it along, and I just thought that was really cool.
I wonder if, like, a creature of that mass is what the worms do in Dune possible, like in the real world. I'm not smart enough in physics to know, but like, are they large and dense enough to have that effect on sand? I don't know. Probably not, but I like to think about it.
Well, yeah, and it's like, you know, kind of calls into question, like, on such a remote desert planet, how can these worms that are massive in size be able to sustain themselves on, like, you know, a few humans per day, you know? Like,
Right. I don't know. Yeah. It doesn't. Did it say what they eat in the movie? Or do they
well, no,
need
it just
to eat?
it just kind of seemed like they ate anything that moved.
Yeah.
You know? It was like, oh, I hear some vibrations on the east side of the planet. I'm gonna go that way and eat something.
Well, and I love that element of we talked about the scene where they save the people from the crawler, but just the fact that the worm will come every time. It's just part of the day-to-day operation that they will work until this last split second, and then they will get lifted off. And the people in the crawler are just like, "Yep, that's our job. That's our dangerous job." Yeah, it's just like their equivalent of blue-collar work, you know, super dangerous. And even everyone except Duke Leto is like, "But all the spice that will be lost." He's like, "Shut up." But even the people in the crawler were like, the spice, because they were probably used to the Harkonnens before. I don't think the crawler workers were part of House Atreides. I think they were just there, right?
I think you're right. I think, you know, it was very much like, you know, profit over, you know, wellness. It's like trying to get as much money as possible. You know, I feel like it's kind of clear in this movie, but like also like in the book, you know, at least the research that I was doing, it seems like spice is just oil, you know?
Yeah.
In the real world, it's just like, you know, whoever controls the oil of the world, you know, can dictate the price, can grow absorbently wealthy. They can, like, you know, really control policy. They can control the environment. They can control so many different things just because they have access to this one crucial resource.
Right.
And that really comes across in this movie to, you know, whoever controls the spice controls the fate of the empire, the fate of millions and millions and millions of people.
The spice must flow.
The spice.
That's from the movie or book or something. It's the quoted line.
Yeah.
But we have been skirting around them, but we should probably talk about the Harkonnens in detail. I love Dave Bautista as, like, the petulant nephew almost. He's very angry and, like, blustery. And in contrast with the Baron, who is more conniving and really gross.
Yes, absolutely. And
Stellan Skarsgård. Oh, the skinnier guy? The guy from Suicide Squad.
For the Polka Dot Man.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's, like, very, like, kind of the footman, like, oh yes, sire, I shall fetch this thing for you, you know, like the evil kind of squire there. And yeah, I think the Harkonnens, I want to see more of them. Like, we only got, like, I would say probably, like, I don't know, 20 minutes of screen time for them. I want to see more of that because, you know, just how the Bill Skarsgård's character, how he was just
Stellan.
Yes, Stellan. How he was just kind of like floating
Mm-hmm.
above like everyone else. He was so much higher. It's like, how is he doing that? Can
Yeah.
I get more information, please?
Well,
I
some
want
of
to
the
know
some
that.
of the soldiers use the same tech when they drop down towards the end before they kill Duncan Idaho.
Oh.
So I think it's like an implant or something in their backs or in their armor that lets them kind of levitate.
Okay.
But I do love, speaking of the Baron and Dr. Yue's betrayal, I love that when he betrays the Atreides, like, he doesn't want to fully betray him. He just wants to get what he wants out of the situation. So he's like, I'm helping your kid escape. Here's a poison capsule so you can kill all the Harkonnens. And then his whole plan, like, similar to how Duke Atreides' plan all falls apart, like, Yue's plan completely falls on its face because the Baron's already killed his wife, kills him too. Then the poison capsule doesn't even kill the Baron.
Yeah. It's like, so close.
Yeah, it kills everyone else, but not the Baron.
Yeah, he escaped to the corner.
Yeah, that added a lot of menace to his character at the end when he comes out of that like black pool and it reveals that he's still alive. It's good shit.
Yeah, I'm excited to see him more as like a villain in the next movie.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm definitely predicting, kind of down the road, the main villain is going to be the Emperor later on. However many books there are, I'm sure that he's probably got some role. Maybe I'm totally off base here, but like, it feels like, if things are going to change in this galaxy, the Emperor needs to go. But then it's like, who do you replace him with? All that stuff. But like, the Harkonnens are clearly evil, but the guy who's like perpetuating these struggles for spice, he kind of seems like the bigger bad guy.
Yeah, and I'm going to go the opposite way, actually. I don't think the Emperor will be seen, at least in Dune Part 2. Villeneuve wants to do the Dune Messiah, which apparently is kind of a continuation of these characters' story, and maybe he'll be in that. But I have a feeling that the Emperor will be an unseen force in this story until at least the very end. So,
like the man behind the curtain.
Like the man behind the curtain. Like he's part of the world, but he's too large scale for the characters we're watching. And I could be totally wrong too.
Oh yes, we are totally crap shooting here based on what we saw in this movie.
Yeah, I did love that vision of Paul and Shawnee. What's Zendaya's character's name? Shawnee, like standing in the ship over that whole army on Caladan, the Atreides' homeworld, which at least that's what it looked like. Yeah, and like those forward visions of him leading the army, like they, to me, felt a little sinister. I don't know if you agree with that. It's like it feels unsettling to watch all that happen for some reason.
Yeah, and like, I think it goes back to what we were talking about with the visions earlier. Like, it's not going to be how it looks entirely. Like, he's not going to be like, there's something amiss there. Like, it could be sinister. It could be like, not at all what we're thinking, or what's being portrayed. Like, it's a vision. It's a dream. It's up to interpretation.
Yeah. Yeah. So we'll see what happens with that.
Yeah, totally. During my research too, there were a few things I just kind of wanted to maybe just discuss really briefly. We don't have to go into these very deeply, but one thing that I noticed when I was doing some research is I came across a few articles that were like really kind of discussing the Islam influences for this film. And, I don't claim to be an expert on Islam ideology or anything like that, but it's very clear that this film and the story in general is very heavily influenced by many cultures, and it represents, that vision of humanity that's a blend of all cultures that we see today. But, that seems like, between the Messiah, between, the the people on Arcadon or Arcades, excuse
Arrakis.
me, that are Arrakis. Thank you. All these names get in my head. That they're like, it seems like that they're very heavily influenced by these Islamic themes, and everything's very deliberate about that. But and people who are probably closer to the book and understand the source material will probably be balking at those articles and being like, come on, yeah, there's some influences about like Muslim culture in there and everything like that. But I feel like there's probably some people out there that are probably saying like, this is kind of a little bit of appropriation, or at least like maybe there's like some erasure of the Islamic culture in this film. Because like the House Atreides is just kind of a bunch of white guys, you know. And I mean, again, we're not experts here. I just read a few articles on this. So maybe, there's just like something to be said about, this movie's maybe not truly entirely paying homage to that culture, but I don't know. I think,
it could also be said, like, if what the Dune fan community says about the white savior elements being very intentional and cautionary, this could be part of that as well.
Yes.
And I don't want to speak too much on it because I don't know, but I did think it was interesting that like the relationship that the Empire has to Arrakis and spice is very similar to the relationship that America and European powers have with oil in the Middle East. Based on, and everyone forgive my ignorance on this, but based on when this book was written, I don't know how early that relationship with the Middle East regarding oil started. This book was written in the 60s. So, and that's just me not knowing my history as well as I should, but it also could be playing with the scramble for Africa from earlier in history, where European countries raced to colonize as much of Africa as they could so they could extract raw resources to enrich themselves. So it could be a blend of both of those things. But it's interesting in today's environment how much this parallels America's relationship with the Middle East. In terms of exploitation and extracting of resources that do not belong to us.
Right. It is kind of a little bit reflective of that story. And, again, I believe that, the author, Frank Herbert, he was very intentional in how he wrote this book, so I think, I would just encourage any listeners to just maybe do a little bit of reading on that and just maybe look a little bit more into that. Because those articles are kind of interesting. Like when I was reading it, I was like, oh, this is very, like, it's thought provoking. But I think, if you had read Dune like numerous times and you understood everything about it, then you might kind of scoff at some of those articles. But it's just kind of brings something to light, because there's like, I don't know. I think this also kind of just speaks to another point of like representation in this movie too. Again, there's going to be a part 2, and I imagine that in part 2 we're gonna see more of this Freeman, and there's going to be a lot more diversity in that cast. There's going to be a lot more different representation there. But one of the critiques that I came across when I was doing research on this was MENA representation, and MENA stands for Middle East and North Africa. House Atreides, lots of white guys. Even the Harkonnens, seems like it's a lot of white guys that are just bald and fat and angry and cruel. And there is representation in this film. I'm not saying there isn't.
But of those regional groups specifically is what you're referencing.
Yes, that regional group specifically, and considering just kind of where a lot of these influences for the novel came from with Islamic scripture and ideology. It kind of it feels like there should be some greater MENA representation there, but again, not an expert, and I'm sure that there's going to be a greater representation in the second film.
Yeah, it seems like I want to say that the casting of House Atreides and Harkonnens is very fucking deliberate. Making them all, and I mean, Yeah, making them all like white or white adjacent, I think, is a very deliberate choice based on the role they are playing in this world. And I would expect that the Fremen will be more diverse. I mean, they are more diverse from what we've seen already, but due to the part of the narrative we're seeing, they are more minor characters, and more diversity is always good. But if the race of your characters matters to the source material, like, you should be smart about how you do it. And I think casting the colonizing characters as white, it matters for that. It's important because that's how the history they are paralleling played out. I could be totally off base about this, and looking at me, I'm not the right person to make definitive statements on that. Neither are you. But
exactly, yeah.
But
we should just,
yeah. And I do want, like, I would say with the articles critiquing Dune for its like parallels to all this stuff, like, I would hope the people writing those articles have read the book and have knowledge of what the book was trying to do with that, if the Dune community is to be believed. Because if people who write for official publications don't do that type of research, then who the fuck does? Like, if people come out of this movie having those feelings, and then they go to like Variety and read about it, and Variety is misrepresenting the intents of the story and why it is the way it is, like, that's a disservice to the viewers and the readers of Variety and the story. So I hope that it's being represented accurately by publications, so that,
yeah, me too, absolutely. And I think, there were just a few articles. I think I saw it on like the Washington Post and maybe like NBC, something like that. So I would hope that they have researched it thoroughly as well. Researched it more than us.
Because I mean, and if it turns out that this is not like a cautionary critique of the white savior narrative and it's just straight up cultural appropriation, then that's a thing to be upset about. But if it is doing that intentionally to warn you about that type of story, then we should give it the benefit of the doubt until we see it play out, I think.
Well, yeah, and I think, the director and the writers, I think that they clearly had a very good understanding of the source material when they were coming up with this film, and then when they were writing it and directing it, they were said, like, this is what the story's about. And they, just looking at how the story was told, like we were just saying earlier, so much is packed into this 2 hours and 35-minute runtime. Yeah. And like, it takes great skill to accomplish something like that. So, I think they knew what they were doing, and I guess we will see. Yeah.
But I guess final thoughts on Dune for me, you should go see it in a theater if you can, in an IMAX theater if you really can. Apparently the frame is like cropped much worse in the regular screenings. Because IMAX is a different aspect ratio, and so I mean that's normal that happens, but it's sad to see like big parts of the frame just get chopped for a regular theater.
I guess I forgot about that. I guess I could have done the IMAX viewing, but to be honest, I was a little hungover that day, so
it was Halloween weekend, weren't we all?
But final thoughts on Dune. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it. I don't really have much to complain about with it. I'm excited for the next movie. This movie's got everything. It's got sci-fi. It's got action. It's got symbolism. It's got oppression and control. It's got themes of leadership and power and hierarchy and betrayal and prophecy and free will and sexism. It persists 8,000 years in the future, and it's a really cool movie. Like I would definitely recommend it for sure.
It is in itself an argument for the merit of movie theaters, I think. Like,
yes, absolutely. I could not imagine viewing this at home.
No,
honestly.
And we will obviously for rewatches. Like, one nice thing about the simultaneous release is you can watch an epic movie in the theater, and then the next day, if you wanted to, just watch it again at home. But if you don't see this on the big screen, you are doing a disservice to your experience, I think. It's so good. The sound alone is worth the theater cost of admission. But Dune, great movie. Go see it. I'm gonna go read it soon. I gotta buy it first, but I'm gonna read it.
Yeah, definitely gonna read it. Definitely go see it. definitely going to rewatch it. But otherwise, Dylan, let's move on to the final part of the episode. What else have you been doing? What have you been watching, reading?
So, Sunday, I went to go see the new Edgar Wright movie, Last Night in Soho, with Anya Taylor-Joy and Matt Smith and a bunch of other people. It is a fucking wild movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really interesting and really stylish. I don't think it totally comes together as much as I would like it to, but it's really freaky and pretty enjoyable. Well, enjoyable. It's kind of upsetting in a lot of ways, but it's a great movie. I think, I'm gonna land on. I liked it a lot. Go watch it. It's cool.
Nice.
But basically, without giving too much away, it's like this girl in modern day who was played by I'm forgetting her name, but she was the Jewish girl in Jojo Rabbit.
Oh yeah,
yeah, she's the main character, and she's going to fashion school in London, and then she falls asleep one night and basically enters into this dream of the 1960s where she kind of becomes Anya Taylor-Joy's character, who wants to be who is an aspiring singer, and then shit goes off the rails. I'm not going to say anything more than that because I don't want to ruin it, but she becomes like more and more attached to what's going on in this 60s era in her dreams, and it is crazy.
That's cool.
Yeah.
I'm into that.
But I also started reading Matthew McConaughey's memoirs called Green Lights. Been pretty interesting. It's just him telling different stories from his life and what he learned from them. The green lights comes from, different opportunities open up in your life, and you take advantage of them. That's a green light. Very much reading the book in his voice.
Yeah.
It's written.
All right.
Yeah, I actually just about that. Actually, that was his first line of dialogue in a movie. Dazed and Confused.
Oh, really?
Yeah. That was the part I read this morning. Actually, he met, I guess, the casting director or a producer of Dazed and Confused in a bar, and then the guy was like, "I want you to play this character. You should audition." And then he was not supposed to have lines in this scene. He was just supposed to be on set, like, watching. And then he and Richard Linklater just started talking about, like, what would this character do, like, da-da-da-da-da-da. And he's like, and Linklater apparently told him, look, do you think your character would try to pick up that girl over there? He's like, yeah. And like, all right, on cue, we're going to have you just get in the car and you drive by and you say what you think you would say. And apparently the line is improv. And apparently Matthew McConaughey's logic was, he's like, my character loves like 4 things. Is like, I forget exactly what he said, but it's like the music, cigarette, something, and then a girl. And he's like, well, I got 3 of those things. All right. And that's the line. And that's how he came up with it.
That's really cool. I dig that.
Yeah.
I love that. That's I need to rewatch Dazed and Confused. That's been
I do too. I have not watched it, but yeah. That
That's
and then
super
the other line, the other famous line that character says is the thing he loves about high school girls is he keeps getting older and they always stay the same age. Which is so gross.
That's creepy.
Yes. And on that note, what have you been watching?
I've been rewatching a lot of stuff.
Okay.
Lately, we rewatched at least a part of Young Frankenstein last night.
Mm-hmm.
That's always a fun movie to just kind of rewatch and just have fun around Halloween. I love that. And we rewatched Hocus Pocus as well.
Fun.
And my memory of that movie was like, I didn't have a very good memory of that movie, and that's kind of there's an awkward point in that movie where it's like, because it's a kids movie, and there's a point in the movie where he basically lights a candle and he brings these witches back to life from the dead, and they start running amok. And the reason why, because anyone could have lit that candle, but the reason why it made sense for him to do it and why they came back to life was because he was a virgin.
Oh yeah.
And it's like, it's this kind of weird plot point in the movie of it's like, wait, this is a kid's movie and they're talking about virginity. Ooh.
Kids movies did a lot more weird shit back in the day.
Yeah, it was a little weird. But I also rewatched Zootopia.
Fun.
I fucking love that movie. And,
it's great.
The stuff it speaks to about, racism and unity and discrimination. It's very poignant. It's very, very well done.
Yeah.
And the other night, I just want to mention this. We didn't finish it, but it's this documentary called Grey Gardens.
Okay.
I don't know if you've heard of it, but it's so bizarre. And the only reason why I stumbled onto it is because of this comedy show called Documentary Now, which I also recommend checking out. I've been rewatching that stuff, but it's this weird documentary, Grey Gardens, about these two women that live in this really dilapidated house, and there's foundational problems. There's it's kind of unsanitary, and it's this weird kind of living situation. One of them's 70, it's her mother,
Yeah.
and then the other one's in her 50s, and it's just, they're such bizarre, eclectic people.
Cool.
I'd recommend checking that out.
Okay,
They
Grey
scream
Garden.
over each
That's
other.
what it's called.
Grey Gardens.
Grey Gardens. Okay.
It's very weird. And then lastly, I'll just throw it in there as well. I've been watching this show called The Raincoat Killer on Netflix. It's about this prolific serial killer from the early 2000s in South Korea.
Interesting.
And it is quite interesting. If you're into true crime, serial killer stuff, check out The Raincoat Killer.
Good to know. Cool. Well, that'll do it for us this week. And I think 2 weeks from now, next episode, Eternals, I think, is our next one.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that comes out Thursday. So the day after this episode goes live. So we'll go see that. And y'all should check it out, too, so you can follow along with the show. Niles, where can people find you online?
People can follow me on Instagram at NilesGotNoStyles right now. Yeah, that's about it. Dylan, where can people follow you?
On Instagram at DylanD1026, on Twitter at DDayMovies, YouTube D-Day Movies as well, Twitch DDay_movies. All of our socials are linked below in the description. And if you like the show and you're watching on YouTube, please like and subscribe. If you are listening on an audio platform and you like the show, drop a 5-star review down. Maybe if it's funny enough, we'll read it on the show. But those help us out a lot in discoverability and all that. And if you know anyone who you think would be interested in this, share it with them. That's how we grow. But with that, we will see you guys in 2 weeks back on the MCU train to talk about Eternals. Bye.
Thank you all for listening. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.